Hi, my name's Tom. Thanks for stopping by and welcome to episode 1 of The Row, a series that combines the documentation of a fundraising challenge I'm undertaking and conversations with people of note regarding mental health. So who am I? I'm just a bloke. A bloke that's had a tricky couple of years, and as a result I've had to look after my mental health like I hadn't before. It's still a work in progress and also a story for another day. The turn of the year, it was apparent to me that I needed to take full control of my life and take some ownership. Empowerment, if you will. That's how The Row was born. A challenge to row the distance between Bury St Edmunds, my hometown in England, to Lisbon, Portugal. 5 kilometres a go, 458 sessions in total, and a projected completion time of just over 18 months. I'm raising money for the mental health service, Shout, the UK's first and only free, confidential, 24/7 text messaging service for anyone who is struggling to cope. For more detail about the challenge, how you can help Shout, and how to donate to the challenge, please click on the link to the Just Giving page in the description below. Thank you. In this episode, I'm joined by Loughborough Lightning and Edinburgh Rugby scrum half Jenny Maxwell to talk about her career, representing Scotland, and the mental side of being a professional rugby player. Full disclosure, Jen is married to Dan, a close school friend of mine. We'll also meet Dan later when he puts me through my paces in a variation of one of my session rows. But first, let's meet Jen. Jenny Maxwell, scrum half, Loughborough Lightning, Edinburgh Rugby, Scotland.
Yep.
Quite the rugby journey so far. How's your season going?
That's a good question, Mouldy. I have been recovering from a very long injury, but I can say that I've returned to rugby off the back of that. So, yeah, season's going positively. Played for Edinburgh so far this season. Not made my return for Loughborough yet, so that is the next step, and then hopefully, pull on a Scotland shirt at some point in the future.
Brilliant. So let's start at the beginning. What got you into rugby? What was the starting point for you there?
So I grew up in Leicester, which is a huge rugby city, and my granddad used to play rugby in Leicestershire. He took me and my older sister down to the local rugby club where he played all of his rugby, and I absolutely loved it. I stepped on the pitch in the freezing cold, gloves on, and my sister completely hated it. So,
so quite the full clash between the two of you.
Yeah, so that was when I was 6, and played all through the kind of mixed age groups into the girls team, and then through into senior women's rugby off the back of that. But aside from injury, I've never taken a break. Just love the sport, love the camaraderie, the team element of it, and I've never lost the love over these last 25 years.
Amazing. So I am aware that your first coach was actually a female coach, which certainly at the time was pretty rare. How did that actually influence you in getting into rugby, and what was her presence for you in terms of the start of your career?
It's a really interesting question actually, because it was only something that I reflected on later on in my career. I've not had that many female coaches along my journey. There have definitely been some, and I know that there's some really brilliant female coaches out there in the Women's Premiership as well at the moment. But for myself, especially in those early years, I was only ever coached by males. Mm-hmm. And then I thought back and I thought, no, my first coach was a woman, and I remember exactly, what she looked like. I was only 6, so it's a long time ago. But I just remember her being really welcoming and warm, and I think I'd always been involved in rugby with my family. So my mum, my grandma, season ticket holders, huge rugby fans. So it was normal to me, and I think that having a female coach at such a young age, again, just normalised that women belong in this space and are welcome in this space.
Do you feel like you are kind of doing a similar role as a player now? Are you normalising that for young girls now wanting to get into rugby?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. But I think we all are. Not just it's everybody that's involved in the sport, and whether that's coaching, playing, officiating. There's so many more opportunities out there for female referees now as well, which is great. So at all levels, there's more female involvement, and I think the exposure that we're getting now makes it a kind of aspiration for young girls coming through, that they can go on and do these things, whether that's to be a player or be a coach or be a referee or, even be part of the backroom staff or whatever it is you want to do.
I think that's a really good point. In a society where there still is a gender gap in sport, how do you find that? And we're talking very much on the positives here. Is there a lot of negativity as well? I mean, I look at online things, there's certainly like comments and things like that. What's your experience of that? Have you encountered that yourself, or is it something that you've kind of learned over time to understand that's just part of it, or is there a future you see that we're kind of reducing that gap and we're in a safer place for that?
I think the gap is reducing over my experiences anyway, but I think there's still a long way to go with that. I think there's a number of examples I could use to describe it, but I think if we're going kind of on the online presence, when we, maybe with Scotland or with international tournaments, there would be negative comments on posts, especially if we hadn't done that well, but that does happen across the board in all areas of sport as well, unfortunately. It is hard to deal with. I think often I would try not to look at those things, but what I have seen a shift in, I think, is the positive comments coming through now and the engagement with what is being put out there online as well. So whether that's the broadcasting, people tuning in to watch matches and the fact that it's being broadcasted more and more widely available, or the kind of online social media side of things, there is a lot of positivity around kind of what's going on in our league or with the international teams as well. And fan bases are growing, crowds are growing.
Numbers are there, aren't they?
The numbers are going up, and that's all we want. And I think if that continues to go in that direction, then the gap will continue to shrink. But there's still so much more we can do to try and ensure that rugby is reaching the audiences that maybe don't have access to it or don't know how to access it.
In terms of those potentially negative comments, is that something you just ignore, or do you kind of try and understand it, or do you not dwell on those? Is there anything you do to just not take that in, or is it let's just focus on the positive because that's where we want to be?
I've been fortunate in the sense that I've not had anything that's been directed personally towards me, but I do know people that have experienced that. And I think if that was what I was experiencing, I think potentially, blocking those comments, there's ways that you can kind of make sure that they're not coming through onto your feeds and such. And we are sort of taught how to do that as well, which is good, to try and protect yourself from that. I remember with Scotland when we were still amateur and we weren't professional or anything like that, we often would get some quite negative comments on posts, on news scores that have been reported, and I don't know, I think some of us used to really try and use that as fuel. Like we were really trying to better ourselves as a team and really try to better ourselves as individuals and striving to make the game as good as we possibly can and be the best athletes that we can be. So we did try and use that as fuel, but I appreciate the amount of those comments we were getting in comparison to maybe some people now were probably not that many. So it's different. Whereas I think if you're getting that constantly, or if it's really quite personally directed or targeted at one individual, that must be really difficult.
You're actually in a pioneering group of women. You were the first Scottish women to be awarded central contracts, right? So tell me a little bit about that experience and how that's helped your career and how we feel that actually that's so good for the women's games. Has that been good so far? I guess we're kind of a year and a half into that, aren't we?
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. And if we spoke before about the early years of my career and very much it's been driven by the love of the game, which I've already mentioned, but I never thought that I could be a professional rugby player.
Yeah.
Growing up or going through the age groups and into university, into senior rugby, I always wanted to be the best I could be because I love doing what I do, but I didn't know that we could be, professional athletes, and I didn't think that would happen in my playing era. The England women's contracts came out, and that was, kind of a first in the women's game, and that was unbelievable. But where we were with Scotland just seemed so far away from that. But what's transpired in the last sort of 5-6 years has been unbelievable, and it's growing at such a speed that you could never have imagined. You know, people have been able to leave their employments if that's what they've wanted to do and focus solely on their game, and it means that the development of our performances has grown massively as well. So what we're able to actually put out there on the pitch has been a better product, and hopefully more enjoyable to watch as well. And from a personal point of view, being able to focus on those finer details of your game and hone your skills and recover well and do those things that we maybe were rushing before or were fitting in around our daily lives, and training before work, go to work, train after work. It means that people have got a lot more flexibility within that.
I guess I kind of obviously talking about my challenge and everything as part of this, and the idea of just around mental health in the society. We're understanding more about mental health, and the awareness is there, but also what's important is the education. I guess in your experience, like, how are you supported as a player from a mental health perspective? Has that changed in your career? And just want to get an understanding of, has that been a shift, and do you have resources, whether that be at Loughborough when you've been at Edinburgh or in Scotland, have they really supported that mental side of the game? Yeah,
there definitely has been a shift. I think everything we've spoken about so far has been quite positive in my experiences. It's there's a lot to reflect on that has been really positive, but any sport at high level is high pressure. It can mean setbacks, and there are lots of people within the game that do and have struggled with their mental health, as there is in the world. But there definitely has been a shift in that support, and I think the contracts and the investment that we've just spoken about has helped with that. Before we would come together as a squad and go back to our normal lives, and whereas now that support is more wrapped around us in terms of being there when we need it in the week, not just when we're in camp together. We have sports psychologists that are available to us. We have sort of performance lifestyle personnel as well that we're able to reach out to if we want to talk about anything, but also if we want to develop ourselves in other ways outside of the sport as well, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's really interesting. My next question was actually who's in your support network? You kind of touched on that as well. Is there anyone else you would put in there?
For me, the main support network has always been family and home. I think, sport is the environment we're in when we're training and we're competing, but we go home at the end of the day and we are in our homes with our families and our loved ones. So for me, my husband and my close friends and family are definitely those that are there regardless of what's going on in rugby. And then my teammates as well. You spend a whole lot of time with those people. They get to see you at your very best and sometimes your worst as well. So no, they're definitely the people I lean on when I need to.
So this is called a WAGMAX variation. So we're going to keep the 5k element of the row, but we'll also, at every 5-minute interval as we go through the workout, we'll be getting off and doing 10 press-ups, 10 sit-ups, synchro, so my pace, the same as Moldy's pace, and then we'll be doing 10 air squats as well. And then once we've done that, we'll then move back onto the row until we've completed a total of 5k. But every 5-minute interval, back on and doing that circuit together.
Rugby is a big part of your identity.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel, with that in mind, of the identity, like how you're seen? Is it all rugby, or is it more of a balance, or do you prefer at times to be seen away from rugby? I'm just kind of interested in your perception of your own identity with that, and obviously being an international rugby player is a big part of it. But is there any frustration with that, I guess, or is it all pretty? You're pretty comfortable with that, and obviously you've got the support network, like you say.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I think it's probably changed. You know, I grew up, I've always studied, I've always worked alongside my rugby, and it was kind of this, you know, I'm this person that does both, and then the kind of professionalism comes in, and then rugby has become more and more of my identity as we've moved into this professional era. But I guess I am still Jenny that's a person outside of rugby, and I think it's important to keep that at the forefront of your mind. I think I've suffered some bad injuries in the game that's taken me out of the game over the last few years, and you're desperately trying to get back and find that rugby playing identity and be the player that you want to be, but you're not always in control of how that happens.
So you had that to contend with as an elite sports person, which is hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
Then COVID hit.
Yeah.
Which is difficult for everyone, but I imagine that's very difficult for rehabilitation of a serious injury. How did you find that?
You know, that was the first time that anything like that had happened to me. I'd been very fortunate in my career. I was 27 at the time that happened, so I'd been very fortunate up until that point to have really been quite robust, not suffered any serious injuries. So, you know, to play sport at that level and not have experienced something like that, I did find myself quite lucky in some ways.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this is my turn now. This has happened to me. It was a contact injury. There was nothing I could have done to avoid that. So I really tried to put that into perspective, and it was tough. And there was some uncertainty around what my rehab would look like with the lockdowns that came with COVID. But it also did give me time where people weren't playing. Nobody was in the gym for a while. We obviously then got elite status, so we could return, which was great. But it did mean that I was like, okay, everyone's having to adapt what they're doing.
So you made it back.
Yep.
Got some momentum.
Yes.
Sadly, injury hit again.
It did.
So this one was the same knee, but it was patella tendon?
Patella tendon, yeah.
How did you find that one? Because all that hard work had gone into getting back,
Mm-hmm.
and then another serious injury. I'm guessing that rehabilitation was a lot more difficult mentally. Was that fair to say?
Yeah. Two very, very different experiences, physically and mentally. My ACL return had gone as smoothly as it possibly could, in terms of, you know, things happened as they should have done, and it all moved along nicely. And I was back playing for a full year before my patella tendon rupture. So in that time, I'd returned from my club. I'd played for Scotland in the Six Nations, made my return there. Played sevens for Scotland as well. We qualified for the Commonwealth Games. With Scotland, we qualified for the World Cup, the first one in 12 years at that point. So huge, huge milestones. And I was, honestly, I've been playing a year. So I've been back for a year, and I felt really good, like playing well, probably playing the best rugby I'd played to that point, and really hungry for more. And then, yeah, that injury happened in the game against Italy. And you just know when it's not good. You just know.
Yeah.
And it was 6 months out from the World Cup. It was 3 months out from the Commonwealth Games. So in the changing room, lying on a stretcher, like, I knew that Commonwealth Games was out the window. Like, regardless of what the injury was, and we didn't know at the time, that was, you know, not happening. And then we kind of had to get all the scans done and everything to try and work out, was the World Cup an option? And we thought it might have been. Maybe naive, don't know. 6 months away. The rehab actually took me 20, which we just never could have imagined. So yeah, really, really challenging physically. Lots and lots of speed bumps. Quite an unusual injury with a history of injury on that knee already. And so mentally, yeah, really, really difficult. You try to find, I guess, the small wins. In rehab we talk about that a lot and try to see the progress that you're making, but there was times where I wasn't making any progress. Things weren't going to plan. Every timeline we set, we didn't hit. And even now out the other end of it, I say out the other end of it, on paper, I've returned and played some rugby, which is amazing.
Yes.
Because there was times this time last year where I didn't know if that would happen. So I'm really proud of myself, but I'm also not playing a huge amount of rugby. So it's, yeah, I'm still not where I want to be, and I've still got a lot of work to do.
Did you feel, to me, if I was in that situation, I think I would feel there's a bit of injustice around that, you know, you've worked hard to qualify for those tournaments and then no fault of anyone, it's taken away from you. Did you ever feel yourself falling into that, or did you work with people to kind of think of it in a different way and position it, like you say, that, you know, this is part and parcel of a professional athlete's career and we need to work on those small wins till you get to the point where you are now? How did you feel?
Yeah, I think I was more on the side of that it's something that's happened, and it is part of the game, and this is the situation that I'm in, and I need to just try and recover from it. It was hard sitting on the sidelines for those big events, especially, I think, missing out on the Commonwealth Games was one, but I really thought that the World Cup was potentially in reach, and then it wasn't. But I guess, like the world, rugby season doesn't stop. I mean, it comes to an end at the end of the season, but these tournaments roll around really, really quickly. So
and pre-season as well.
There's always one to work towards, and I was really devastated not to be at the World Cup, and you know, to see the girls go and represent Scotland at a World Cup in New Zealand was incredible, and I was behind them every single step of the way. But it did hurt not being there. But I think taking confidence in that we'd qualified, and that hopefully that will be a norm for us now going forward. Because of COVID, the next World Cup was only 3 years away, not 4. So there was lots of things that I was looking at that were putting it into perspective, and actually the contribution that I'd had in terms of the team getting there, I tried to take a lot of pride in that as well.
Off the pitch, you're a mentor for students at Loughborough University. Can you talk about your role there and who you work with? Yeah,
so I've been a performance lifestyle mentor at Loughborough for the last sort of probably 4 years now. And I worked with a range of sports, from hockey to football, basketball, lots of different sports, netball as well. And my role's changed slightly now, so I just support the athletes that are on the Elite Foundation course, which is a foundation year that the elite athletes can study if they didn't get the grades to get into Loughborough on a degree programme. So they do that year and then they move on to their degree.
Right.
So I support them through that. It's a bit of a whirlwind. They have 1 year to get the grades they need to move on to their degree, but they're trying to compete and trying to train and do the elite sport thing as well. So I guess the challenges they face are similar to the ones I've faced, and I try to support them through that and signpost them to people that can help them if I can't.
Is mental health something you talk about with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're supported really well in that from a university level as well, in terms of helping us as in our job roles to support those students and know that we're not I guess, the only people that are there for them. And there's lots of services at the university that if it's something that, you know, I'm not an expert in or I can't deal with, I'm not qualified, I guess, in that space. So there's lots of people that we can signpost them to, or services that we can signpost them to in the local area or within the university, that can help them. But I think some of them, knowing that people like myself are there, the door's open, they can come and start those conversations, and whether it's what's going on in their sport or their home life or their academics, there's a space for them to go and talk that through. When I was, you know, looking at these roles and exploring what was out there, I guess in that space, a kind of the wellbeing space in sport, I was reflecting on my experiences throughout my journey and, you know, what my skills lend themselves to, but also what would I have benefited from when I was studying, or as I've moved through into my professional career as well. Like what would I have benefited from, and how can I use my experiences to help other people as well.
What advice would you give to aspiring athletes?
I guess push yourself out of your comfort zone. I think that's something I didn't do when I was younger. I think growing up playing with males and females in mixed teams, I was quite shy, and I would maybe not try things that I wanted to try because, I don't know, I was too shy to, or nervous or whatever. But I think, looking back now, I think just try everything. You know, if you get it wrong and make a mistake, that's okay. That is fine. And so I'd push it, just step out your comfort zone and try new things. But I think as well, just enjoy every single day that you're with the team that you're with. To try and be present, because it moves extremely quickly. Time goes extremely quickly. So
Is there anything you do for your mental health now that you didn't necessarily do at the start of your career, or even when you were younger, outside of rugby, that you do now? Or is there anything you've learnt in that period of time?
I think a few kind of sense checking things that I do. There's been times over the last rehab, sort of last year and a half, that the times I felt really quite overwhelmed, and I guess struggled to see the way forward, because it's been quite unknown at times. So I think having an opportunity to stop and reflect on what it is I actually can control is really useful, and something that maybe I didn't need to do before. I would just roll with the punches, and I guess just keep working as hard as I could. And there's been times in this rehab where I am working as hard as I possibly could, and it's not going the way we anticipated, or I anticipated. So opportunity to reflect on the journey, how far we've come, and the progress that we've made can be good to put things into perspective, but also focusing on what I can control. And sometimes that might be writing stuff down on what's bothering me, what can I control out of those things, because often it's not very many that we can control.
Well, there we have it. Big thanks to Jem for providing insight into her world of rugby, and how looking after your mental health is as much a part of being a pro as the physical side of the game. From our conversation, I was reminded that you can take a different perspective on events in your life and how you view them, and not to forget to take stock in your current position and see the achievements to get to that point, even if it's not quite your end goal yet. If you enjoyed this episode and want to follow my journey alongside seeing more conversations with interesting people about mental health, please consider liking the video, hitting the subscribe button, and enabling the alert bell for the channel. I appreciate any support, whether that be donations, motivation in the comments, or sharing any of the Row content. As a reminder, the Challenge Just Giving page is in the description below, and you may have also spotted that I'm wearing a t-shirt of the Row. You'll also find that link in the description and be able to buy the t-shirt and other merch as well. Proceeds go towards the challenge total and ultimately to Shouts. Big up Shout on all the work that they do, and also to you, particularly if you've made it this far into the video. See you in the next episode.